congratulations. You just woken up inside a slit of stone. It's barely dawn, and the first thing you notice isn't the view, it's the smell. Dry, metallic, the scent of ancient copper coins and your own sweat. You don't remember falling asleep here, but your back aches like you've been lying on bedrock for hours. That's because you have. Welcome to Petra, not the one from travel brochures. No tourists, no selfie sticks, no lemonade stands selling overpriced, authentic spices. You've landed somewhere between history and hallucination, somewhere around 84 BC. Give or take a sandstorm. You try to stand. The dust clings to you like memory. Your legs are stiff, your throat already desert dry, and your sandals. Wait, you're wearing sandals? Yes. Leather straps. Hand-stitched. Slightly too small. Your pinky toe is already staging a rebellion. You're not in a dream. You're in the sick. A narrow canyon carved not by human hands, but by water, centuries of flood and fury. It winds like a snake that forgot its destination, curling between cliffs that rise like cathedral walls. You're small here, insignificant, a passing thought between two slabs of eternity. The rock around you glows pink in the early light. Not the kind of pink that sells cosmetics. This is older, heavier, the color of dried roses, of faded blood, the kind of pink that remembers the names of forgotten gods. Your footsteps echo, soft at first, then louder, until you realize it's not just your footsteps. There are others, voices, low murmurs in a language you don't understand, yet somehow recognize. It sounds like water being poured over gravel, like time clearing its throat. Someone brushes past you, a woman, veiled, with coal-lined eyes and hands stained with saffron. She doesn't look at you, because you're not supposed to be here. You're a shadow with no name. And Petra doesn't welcome strangers. It absorbs them. You walk, because what else can you do? And the deeper into the canyon you go, the more the walls close in. They lean gently, as if trying to whisper something to you. A secret? A warning? You can't tell, but they're listening. Overhead, slivers of sky, so blue it feels like a lie. A bird calls, sharp and alone. And for a moment, you forget what year it is. Your throat scratches. Your lips crack. You're thirsty. Not just, I could use a drink, thirsty. No, this is I'd sell my soul for a drop of water, thirsty. And just when you think the canyon will squeeze the air from your lungs, you see it, a glow. A crack of golden light pouring through the rock like honey. And beyond that, columns. Massive, ornate, impossible, carved straight into the mountain like a hallucination made of sandstone. The treasury. Al-Khazna. But that's later. For now, you're just standing here, covered in dust, wrapped in heat, and blinking at a world that never meant for you to return. This is not a history lesson. It's not a documentary. It's not even safe. This is Petra, and you just arrived, but not by choice. Sleep will come later. First, let the stone remember you. You keep walking, because something tells you stopping would be worse. The canyon has narrowed again. Now it's no wider than your outstretched arms, and the stone curves above you like the throat of a sleeping giant. You're not walking through a passage. You're being swallowed. This place, the sick, is not a road. It's a wound, carved not by engineers, but by a furious, ancient flood that once tore through the sandstone like grief through skin. And you're the scab. Look up. No, really, tilt your head. Just don't lose your balance. The cliffs rise almost 80 meters, but they don't rise clean. They ripple, veined with blushes of red, ochre, and violet. It's not just geology, it's mood. Petra blushes for no one, but sometimes, in this light, it remembers how to flirt. The air here is still. Not because there's no wind, there is. But it's the kind of wind that doesn't move leaves. It moves memory, It brushes your cheek like a breath from something that once lived, once ruled, once prayed, and then forgot to die. You run your hand along the wall. It's smoother than you expect, almost soft. You feel the marks of old chisels, worn down by centuries of silence. People carved messages here. A few are still visible. Names, dates, please. Some written in Greek, some in Nabatean, some in symbols that don't belong to any language at all. You see a crude carving of a camel. Next to it, a star. Maybe a map. Maybe a warning. Or maybe just an ancient teenager tagging his favorite animal. History doesn't always explain itself. The sick isn't straight. It turns and turns again. Each bend is a promise. Something waits just beyond. And each promise is a lie. For now. But that's Petra's nature. She withholds. She seduces slowly. One glimpse at a time. She doesn't reveal herself to the impatient. Then you hear it. Not a voice. Not footsteps. But something deeper. A hum. Subterranean. Like a city breathing just beneath your own heartbeat. It comes from the walls or under them or maybe behind your ribs. You're not alone. Not in the spooky, haunted way, though let's not rule that out, but in the existential way. The way that makes you realize how many millions of feet have walked this same path. How many sandals, hooves, wheels, and prayers have passed through this canyon. Traders from India, pilgrims from Babylon, soldiers from Rome. They all came here, not to conquer, but to see, to wonder, to belong. And not all of them left. You stop beside what looks like a wall, but it's not. Look closer. There, carved into the cliff, is a niche. Inside it, there remains a worn statue. A god? A king? A water spirit? No inscription. Just empty eyes and the echo of forgotten offerings. Maybe this was a place of prayer, or maybe just a spot where someone hid from the sun. You'll never know. That's the price of visiting a place that was never meant to survive this long. Petra wasn't built to last. It was built to hide. And yet, it's still here. As you round the next bend, the light shifts. It bleeds in from a sliver of sky above, turning the sandstone into molten honey. It's so beautiful you almost forget to breathe. Almost. This isn't a canyon. It's a veil, a drawn curtain. And on the other side of that curtain, something ancient is waiting, patiently, like it knew you were coming. But not yet. Not quite. For now, the sick wraps around you like a silk scarf dipped in dust and myth. It wants to show you something, but only when it's ready. You keep walking, and Petra keeps listening. You finally step out of the sick, and there it is. No warning, no drum roll. Just revelation. A massive facade, columns, urns, pediments, and shadows, rises from the rock like a hallucination with excellent architecture. Al-Khazna, the so-called treasury. But this isn't about treasure. This is proof. Proof that someone, centuries ago, looked at a mountain and said, yes, I'll live inside that. The people who did this, they weren't pharaohs. They weren't emperors. They were something else entirely. They were Nabateans. And no, don't feel bad if you've never heard of them. Most people haven't. Their history's soft whisper in a world addicted to screams. But they were here, quietly, brilliantly, stubbornly. See, the Nabateans didn't set out to build an empire. They didn't care about conquest or statues of themselves in heroic poses. They didn't write epic poems about their battles, because there weren't many. They built roads, not legacies. Wells, not war machines. They worshiped gods with names that sound like sandstorms, Dashra, Al-Azza, and they drew maps in stars, not in borders. What they mastered was survival, not in the poetic, Instagrammable way, in the how do you live in a place that literally hates you way. They carve homes into cliffs. They captured rain from the sky like it was sacred, because it was Every drop was an answered prayer. Every cistern, a cathedral. They didn't build their cities on rivers. They built them where no one else dared. And in doing so, they became something strange. A kingdom of water in a land of thirst. A network of silence between two roaring worlds. Rome to the west, Persia to the east. Petra was their heart, but it pulsed with the rhythms of other lands. India, Egypt, Greece, Arabia. Because the Nabateans were traders. Not the casual, let me browse kind. The kind who crossed burning deserts on camelback for weeks just to sell one vial of frankincense to a Roman woman with too much gold and not enough God. And they made a lot of money, like suspicious amounts of money. Enough to build this temple, this tomb, this whatever it is that you're still staring at with your jaw slightly open and a fly hovering dangerously close. But here's the twist. They didn't write their own history. Not much of it, anyway. No grand annals. No stone-carved victories. Just graffiti, shipping manifests, broken altars. And yet they left this. A kingdom carved into cliffs. A city that vanishes into rock when the light changes. A culture that traded in incense, spices, and the art of vanishing. Because the Nabateans had a secret. They understood something empires always forget. Visibility is vulnerability. They let others fight. Let Rome conquer. Let Persia burn. Meanwhile, Petra grew. Quietly. Like a root. Like a rumor. And when they finally did draw the attention of Rome, they didn't fight. They negotiated. They merged. They dissolved gracefully. No grand fall. No last stand. Just silence. And that's what you're standing in now. The silence of a people who never wanted power. Only peace. Only water. Only the freedom to disappear. You sit down on a warm stone ledge. The sun is climbing. The rock is breathing. And somewhere deep inside the mountain, the Nabateans are still whispering. Don't look at us. Look around. You're not in the ruins of an empire. You're in the echo of a choice. And it's beautiful. Your mouth is a desert. Your tongue, a sand dune. Your lips feel like someone rubbed them with salt and forgot to apologize. You're thirsty. Not the kind of thirst that a sip of mineral water can solve. This is older, deeper, a thirst you feel in your bones. The kind of thirst that humbles you. But you're not alone. Everyone who's ever walked this path, merchant, pilgrim, thief, has known this thirst. And the Nabateans? They built a kingdom with it. Welcome to the architecture of survival. The sandstone around you isn't just pretty. It's engineered. And not in the well, that's clever way. In the you'll die if we don't do this right way. You see that crack running along the base of the cliff? That's not erosion. That's a channel. Hand-carved, precise, almost invisible. Designed to catch every rare drop of rain that dares to fall in this cursedly beautiful place. Petra averages just a few inches of rainfall a year. But somehow, this city once held tens of thousands of people. With livestock, with bathhouses, with gardens. Yes, gardens. How? Because the Nabateans were not warriors. They were hydraulic magicians. They built catchment basins, diversion tunnels, underground cisterns. They read the land like scripture. They knew where water liked to hide, deep in the folds of the mountains, inside sleeping stone. And they convinced it to stay. They didn't fight the desert. They bargained with it. You spot a man, a trader probably, leading 2 camels. He stops beside a square hole in the ground, covered in palm leaves. He lifts the cover and dips a bowl. Water. Cool. Clear. Not a lot, but enough to make your throat ache with envy. You walk over, hoping he'll share. He doesn't. He looks at you like you've asked to borrow his lungs. Water isn't a courtesy here. It's a currency. More valuable than gold. More sacred than blood. And it's not just about drinking. It's about control. He who controls water in the desert doesn't need an army. He already has one, because every caravan needs to drink. And Petra? It was the last oasis before the long nothing. So they came. From Damascus, from Gaza, from the Red Sea. And they paid. With silk, with incense, with silver. And the Nabateans? They stored the water in great cisterns, cut into the rock like wounds that heal. They covered them, guarded them, worshipped them. You pass a stone basin tucked into the wall. A little trickle flows from a spout shaped like a lion's head. It's ceremonial now, dry, cracked, but you can almost hear it. The slow, rhythmic drip of ancient life. A lullaby for survival. Some say Petra's true temples weren't the tombs or the facades. They were these, the hidden systems, the silent reservoirs, the places that held the gods of moisture and mercy. Because here, water is divinity. You sit on a warm ledge, eyes half closed. The sun is sharp, like it's trying to carve you too. Your lips split slightly when you smile, which ouch. But something about this thirst feels sacred. You're not just parched, you're being initiated. This is Petra's first lesson. You don't own the land. You don't master it. You listen to it. You learn to thirst like the Nabateans did. Quietly, gratefully, creatively. A single drop can outlive an empire. And here it did. The wind picks up. It licks your skin like a warning. And somewhere nearby, beneath your feet, under layers of stone and time, a cistern still waits. Full, patient, ready. You won't drink tonight, but Petra will. And in a way, that's enough. You take the final step, and just like that, the canyon exhales. After the long, coiling breath of the sick, after miles of whispering stone and the constant feeling that something ancient is watching you from behind, the world opens. And what's waiting? A miracle, a lie, a monument pretending to be both. Al-Khazna, the treasury, or so they call it. What you're looking at isn't just a building. It's a performance, a vertical hallucination carved directly into the flesh of the cliff like someone took a Greek temple, flattened it, and hammered it into rose-colored stone with divine arrogance. But let's get one thing clear. It's not a treasury. Never was. That name? It came from local legends. Bedouins swore a pharaoh once fled here and hid his gold in that massive urn carved at the top. They even shot bullets at it hoping to crack it open. Spoiler, it's solid. The bullets bounced. The gold never came. Only more dust. So what is it? That's the thing. Even now, no one's entirely sure. A tomb? Maybe. A shrine? Possibly. A royal flex? Absolutely. But what it really is theater. You walk closer, craning your neck. The facade towers over you, nearly 40 meters high, but it doesn't scream. It whispers. Its columns are Corinthian, its decorations Hellenistic. There are eagles and Amazons, friezes and gods you'd expect to find in Athens or Alexandria. It's Greek, but not quite. Like a dream someone had of Greece after chewing too much frankincense. This is propaganda in stone, a Nabatean message written in a borrowed language. We can play your game, but we'll carve the rules into our own mountain. They didn't just build for function. They built for effect. Because when a foreign merchant or Roman official emerged from the sick and saw this, they didn't see a desert tribe. They saw power, culture, mystery, and fear. Because this wasn't just beauty. This was control. Al-Khazna isn't a place you enter. It's a place that enters you. You step closer and for the first time realize the detail. Not just the grandeur, but the small touches. The grooves left by the tools. The faint remnants of paint. Yes, paint. Once this wasn't soft pink and sandstone. It was vibrant, shouting in crimson, turquoise gold. Now, the color is gone, but the arrogance remains. You place your hand on the stone. It's warm, alive, And beneath it, you swear you can feel a pulse. Not yours, theirs. The men who carved this. They didn't build scaffolding. They carved from the top down, hanging off the cliff with ropes, chipping away at the earth's bones with iron and obsession. Can you imagine that? Dangling over nothing, inching downward with every hammer stroke. A mistake meant death, but perfection meant immortality. They chose immortality, and now here you are, standing before something that was never meant to hold treasure. Only attention, because that's the real trick. Al-Khazna isn't about what's inside. It's mostly an empty room. Sorry to ruin the mystery. It's about what it makes you feel. Awe, confusion, insignificance. The slow, creeping suspicion that you're standing before something smarter, older, and more patient than you will ever be. It's not a treasury. It's a mirror. It reflects your desire to find meaning, to uncover gold, to name things that were never meant to be named. You sit in the shade of a nearby alcove. The dust dances, the rock glows, and you realize maybe the true treasure isn't what they hid. Maybe it's what they let you believe. You've been staring at Al-Khazna for a while now, long enough for the sun to shift, for the shadows to crawl, for the illusion to settle into your bones. It doesn't blink. It doesn't change. It just waits. But Petra wasn't built to be beautiful. Not just. It was built to be watched. And more importantly, to witness. You wander off the main path, following a narrow trail that smells like dust and goat fur. There are no signs, no velvet ropes, only whispers in the wind. You're heading to a place they don't advertise on postcards. A place where the Nabateans didn't carve facades. They carved obedience. It's not far. A natural amphitheater rises from the rock, tiered and crude. But the stone is polished, smooth from centuries of sandals and ceremony. You feel it before you hear it. The hush, the hum, the gravity of a space that remembers pain. Here, under the open sky, surrounded by red cliffs that trap both sound and scent, something sacred and terrifying took place. This was no market, no lecture hall. This was a stage for the gods. You walk to the center. It's quiet now, but close your eyes. Listen. You'll hear it. The drums. Low, rhythmic, relentless, echoing off stone like heartbeat and thunder. Then the chants, in a language made of vowels and wind. Words meant not for understanding, but for surrender. And then, the animal, not a lion, like you're imagining. No, just a lamb, a goat, sometimes a child. Yes, that happened. Not often, but often enough for the cliffs to remember the sound. The priest would lift the blade, bronze, bone-handled, heavy with inheritance, and the offering would end, not in silence, but in the wet sound of life leaving. The blood would spill onto the altar, carved, of course, into the rock. It would soak into the sandstone, mixing with dust and deity. A gift to Dushra, to Al-Uzza, to the ones whose names we no longer pronounce correctly, because they were never meant to be spoken, only feared. You take a step back. You didn't expect this. You came for temples, for columns and mystery and the aesthetic thrill of the exotic. But Petra was not built on wonder. It was built on contracts. Blood for favor, flesh for rain, suffering for safety. The gods of the desert are not merciful. They're thirsty, and they watch. Some scholars today will tell you this never happened, that the Nabateans were too enlightened, too Hellenized, that they imported Greek columns and Roman fashion, and surely that meant they also imported morals. But then, what's a stain in the rock? Why does the altar tilt just slightly so the blood could run? And why, if this never happened, does your body feel so cold in the heat? You sit down on a nearby ledge. Not too close. You can still see the groove where the fluid flowed. You think about belief, about what people are willing to do for security, for crops, for water, for children who survive the night. And suddenly, the marketplace feels very far away. Petra wasn't just a city. It was a contract. And contracts, back then, were written in fluids, not ink. You open your eyes. The amphitheater is empty again. No drums, no cries. Only the wind brushing the stone like a hand over old scars. But deep in the sandstone, the gods still whisper, and Petra still remembers who fed them. Night falls in Petra like a sigh. The sky bruises from gold to ash, and the cliffs slowly lose their color. Those famous rose-red walls turning to violet, then to charcoal, then to memory. You sit by the rock-cut tombs, your back against sandstone that still radiates the heat of the day. And for the first time in hours, maybe days, you think you hear silence. But Petra never sleeps. Not really. The wind keeps moving, and with it comes the faintest sound. At first, you think it's nothing, a trick of nerves, the echo of your own breath. But then it comes again, a jingle, soft, metallic, like jewelry made of coins, like bells tied to something tall, slow-moving, and deliberate. Caravans. You're not imagining it. The ghosts have begun their procession. You close your eyes, and just like that, you're in the middle of it. A line of camels stretches through the mountain pass, necks swaying like ships on quiet seas. Their footsteps leave shallow prints in red dust. The air is thick with the scent of cedarwood, cardamom, sweat, and damp wool. Men walk beside the beasts, draped in layers of linen and silence. Some speak Greek, some Aramaic, some say nothing at all. They've come from everywhere. From Damascus, carrying lapis and glass. From India, loaded with pepper, saffron, and silks dyed deeper than royal bruises. From Arabia, weighed down with frankincense and myrrh so sacred they had to pray before packing it. All of it flows through here, through Petra, through this maze of stone and stillness. Because Petra isn't just a city, it's a throat, and the world's riches pass through it. You are surrounded by commerce, but not the capitalist hellscape of modernity. This isn't about profit. This is about ritual. To trade here is to step into choreography. Each offer a gesture, each exchange a performance of trust, risk, and etiquette older than any law. And above it all, Petra watches. Not from towers, there are none. Not from battlements. Petra had no need. The cliffs themselves are the eyes. And the tombs? They never stopped listening. A merchant stops to rest. He takes a swig from a goatskin flask. He looks around, paranoid but used to it. This city has no guards. But there's a feeling here that every lie is overheard. He wipes his brow, unpacks a bundle, sits beside his goods like a priest beside sacred scrolls. He doesn't worship his wares, but he does fear them, because in Petra, wealth is power and power is unstable. The Nabateans? They saw this. They built a kingdom not on thrones, but on logistics, on understanding what people needed before they knew they needed it. Water, shade, salt, safe passage. They didn't conquer. They calculated. They didn't expand. They waited. Every caravan that entered Petra left lighter. Not just in cargo, but in soul. This place, it took something, not violently, not with spears, but with gravity. You feel it now, that subtle pull. The way Petra demands your attention, your awe, your surrender. You lie back against the stone, looking up at stars that have not changed since the first camel passed this way. And you wonder how many others, thieves, princes, scribes, widows, have looked up from this same spot and thought, this is the center of everything. And for a moment, it is. Not Rome, not Babylon, not Jerusalem, but here, this city of ghosts and caravan bells, where the wind smells like spice, where the stone still sings. where every footstep is an echo of 1,000 more. Petra, it doesn't need to speak. It lets the travelers do it for her. And you're one of them now. Just another whisper in the night. You wake up just before dawn. Not because of the cold, though it's sharp, biting at your cheeks like a vengeful whisper. And not because of noise. Petra doesn't need volume to wake you. It's the feeling that someone is watching. You sit up slowly. The city is still cloaked in its blue-gray twilight robe. And the tombs, those carved faces of forgotten elites, are no longer majestic. They are hollow-eyed watchers, silent, unreadable. And in the hush between shadow and sun, a name floats to you. A name whispered through centuries of dust and denial. Shakalath, Queen of Petra. Or maybe it's myth. It's hard to say. Because history, as you've likely realized by now, is not a careful librarian. It's a drunk poet scribbling truths between metaphors. But still, her name returns. Shakalath. They say she ruled beside her husband, King Aretas IV, during Petra's golden age. But that word beside, it's complicated, because some say she didn't just share the throne. She breathed the decisions. She moved the money. She spoke in negotiations not as a consort, but as a queen who'd tasted salt and sweat and the delicate sting of power and found it delicious. Her image appears on coins. Not always, but enough. Not tiny, modest, lowered eyes. No, bold, profiled, hair coiled like serpents, eyes calm and lethal. This wasn't ornamentation. This was declaration. But the real stories? They never made it on a currency. Those live here, in the canyons, in the songs the wind carries between cliffs when no one's listening. They say she came from the south, Arabia, maybe, or from deeper deserts, places where water disappears before you can see it. She arrived in Petra not with dancers or gold, but with maps, with merchants, with leverage. Aretas was king, yes, but Shakalath was motion. When the spice routes shifted, she felt it in her bones. When Rome breathed too heavily on the eastern borders, she sent gifts, carpets, wine, women, and watched the legion soften. But she wasn't beloved, not by everyone. Whispers grew like thorns, too ambitious, too foreign, too loud, and yet every caravan paid its taxes. Every priest lit their incense. Every merchant bowed, because Shakalath didn't rule from the throne. She ruled from the invisible architecture of influence. She was the wind, felt not seen, feared not questioned. You walk now under a niche in a cliff face. The locals call it the Queen's Gaze. No inscription, no statue, just a ledge. And the rumor that once she stood here at sunset, watching the caravans stretch for miles into the horizon, her silhouette painted in gold, her silence louder than any proclamation. Some say she died in her sleep. Others say she vanished, disappeared into the southern desert on a camel with no markings, no guards, no trace. One legend claims she didn't die at all, that she's still here, watching. Every time the wind shifts suddenly in Petra, every time a woman walks alone through the sick with her chin held high, they say it's her. You reach the ledge. Look out. The city still sleeps, but something deeper stirs. Something ancient, female, and unbending. History didn't record her voice, but Petra still listens to it. And now, so do you. You've heard the phrase, the gods were listening. It comforts people, makes them feel less alone, gives their suffering shape, purpose. But here, in Petra, that phrase doesn't quite hold up, because the gods were watching. But whether they ever listened, that's another story entirely. You step into a rock-cut sanctuary nestled into the cliffside, half hidden behind weathered columns and a slouching fig tree. It's cooler inside. Smells faintly of burnt resin and something older. Like bone, Like regret, the walls are covered in niches. Empty now, but once they cradled statues of gods with foreign names, impossible shapes, and expressions that never changed. You spot the remains of a relief, a figure with no face, arms lifted, body abstract, carved more like an idea than a person. That's Dashra, the high god of the Nabateans. A block of stone with no features. No eyes, no mouth, no ears. Symbolic? Yes. Practical? Maybe. Terrifying? Absolutely. This wasn't a god who smiled upon your crops. This was a god who endured, unmoved by pleas or plagues. Petra's pantheon didn't come with bedtime stories. No lightning bolts or tridents. Just stone, presence, and a deep, unsettling silence. You light a lamp, or pretend to. The shadows flicker across the altar, and suddenly you can imagine it. The priests, draped in layered linens, their eyes darkened with coal, their mouths reciting chants in a language lost somewhere between Arabic and dust. A goat is brought forward. It smells of fear and old straw. The blade flashes. Blood steams on stone. And above it all, the god does not move. No nod. No thunderclap. No fire from heaven. Just that same maddening stillness. It wasn't indifference. It was divinity. The kind that doesn't stoop to console. Because here's the thing the desert teaches you. Not all silence is absence. Sometimes silence is the answer. And sometimes it's a test. You walk through the sanctuary slowly, eyes tracing inscriptions chipped into the walls. Some are prayers. Some are names. Some are just lines. A scratch here. A mark there. Votives from the desperate, hoping to catch the eye of a god who had no eyes. They believed anyway. They believed hard. Because belief wasn't optional. Not here. Not when the rain didn't come. Not when a child coughed through the night. Not when the caravan disappeared into a sandstorm and never came back. When life is this fragile, faith isn't religion. It's insurance. And even if the gods never replied, they still mattered. Because Petra wasn't just stone. It was sacred architecture. Every channel of water, every step, every carved urn or lion-headed spout. It was all designed with the gods in mind. To please them. To appease them. Or maybe to remind them. You step back into the sunlight. It blinds you for a second, and in that moment, you feel it. That strange, ancient dissonance. The gods saw everything. They just didn't always care. And somehow, knowing that makes them feel even more real. Let's talk about your mouth. No, really. Don't be shy. It's part of the journey. And right now, it's a disaster zone. You haven't brushed your teeth in 1,900 years. And it shows. Your tongue feels like it's been sandpapered with camel hide. Your breath? Somewhere between salted goat meat and archaeological evidence. You'd kill for a mint, or a toothbrush, or a time machine. But there are no mints in Petra. No Colgate. No sonic toothbrush humming away in a marble sink. You are a pre-modern mouth in a world with very low dental expectations. And yet, the Nabateans weren't totally lost. They did something. You walk past a group of traders resting under a faded canopy. One of them is chewing on a stick. Looks like driftwood, but it's not. It's a miswak, a traditional chewing stick cut from the Salvadora persica tree. Antibacterial, mildly abrasive, slightly minty, and completely unimpressive to modern eyes. But this was it. The toothbrush before the brush had bristles. A twig and a prayer. Rub it long enough, and maybe you'd scrape off last night's lamb fat. The irony? Miswak actually works. It cleans. It freshens. It even leaves a tingly feeling if you do it right. But you don't have one. You just have a mouth full of desert and regrets. You swipe a finger across your teeth. It comes back gray. You spit. It lands near your sandal with a thud. Somewhere a fly gets interested. Let's not romanticize the ancient world. People stank. Mouths were mini graveyards. Teeth fell out like overripe fruit. And breath, wasn't something you noticed until it stopped. Imagine trying to flirt under these conditions. You approach a woman selling spice bundles. She's stunning, veiled, eyes dark like storm clouds. She smiles. You smile. And then, oh, she recoils slightly. You pretend it's the wind. She knows it's not. This is your life now. But even so, you're alive. And there's something deeply human about this body you're carrying. This smelly, broken, underhydrated, oversun thing. Because Petra isn't just a city of gods and ghosts. It's a city of bodies. Bodies that sweat, that rot, that bleed, crave, ache. That walk for days without water and still find the strength to kiss someone goodbye. You scratch your scalp. Sand falls out. You didn't know sand could stick to your scalp, but here we are. Your skin is dry, cracked at the knuckles. Your feet. Let's not talk about your feet. And yet, there's something intimate about this breakdown. You're no longer a visitor. You're a participant. Your blisters are now a part of the archaeological record. You sit beside a low wall, part of a crumbling aqueduct. And for a second, you just exist. Filthy, exhausted, unbrushed, and still, somehow, beautiful. Because in Petra, your body stops being an inconvenience. It becomes a ritual. The ache in your thighs is a prayer. The salt on your lips, an offering. The dust in your teeth, a signature of time. And tomorrow, you'll still stink. You'll still crave a mint that hasn't been invented. But you'll also understand this place in a way the clean never could. You don't smell good, but you belong. You've been staring at a facade for what feels like an hour. Not the famous one. Not Al-Khazna. This one's quieter, tucked higher into the cliff. Half collapsed, half forgotten. Its columns lean like drunk philosophers. Its doorway is too narrow, as if carved for gods who never skipped leg day. And yet, it's beautiful. Impossibly beautiful. But what haunts you isn't the architecture. It's the question. How the hell did they build this? Let's take stock. No cranes. No steel beams. No harnesses rated for safety. No OSHA inspectors with clipboards and sunscreen. And yet somehow, they carved temples into vertical mountains, starting from the top and working their way down. Like some kind of gravity-defying miracle. Or a death wish with artistic ambitions. Imagine this. You're 19. Poor. Desperate. You've been conscripted into a team of stonecutters. You're handed a bronze chisel, a hammer, a rope, and told to climb. You scale the face of a cliff under a sun that wants to cook you alive. You anchor yourself to a peg that looks like it was borrowed from a shepherd's tent. And you start chipping away, stone by stone, flake by flake. Strike, breathe, pray, repeat. One wrong move, you don't fall onto soft sand. You fall on a rock, and then onto legend. Because Petra doesn't remember names. It remembers bloodstains. And yet they kept building. Not with maps, not with computer models, but with something far more reckless. Faith. Faith that the stone would hold. Faith that the rain would wait. Faith that a structure begun from heaven would eventually meet the earth. And that's the strange part. You'd think carving from the top down was madness. But it was genius. It meant no scaffolding, no support beams, no clearing space at the bottom. Just start from the sky and descend, like gods creating worlds. The Nabateans didn't just build on the land. They built into it, with it. The cliffs weren't obstacles. They were collaborators. Every line of symmetry, eyeballed. Every curve of a column, estimated with shadows. Every mistake, permanent. And yet, the facades are near perfect. Even now, after earthquakes, after wind, after the soft gnaw of time, you run your hand across one of the carvings. A floral motif worn but precise. You feel the faint ridges of a vine, blooming upward, defying the stone's will. It's not decorative, it's devotional, because building here wasn't just construction. It was ritual. Every hammer strike was a prayer. Every finished tomb, an act of surrender. Petra didn't rise from ambition. It rose from belief. That beauty was worth the risk. That a structure could transcend death. That if the gods wouldn't come down, then man would climb up. You sit at the base of a lesser-known tomb, unnamed, unsung. A worker's tomb, maybe, or a child's. It leans slightly now, cracked at one corner, but it still stands. You imagine the man who carved it. Skin baked dark, muscles trembling, eyes squinting into the impossible. And still he carved, not for glory, not for wealth, but because someone believed it mattered. And maybe that's enough. You lean back, your spine against stone. You look up. There's a ledge 2 stories above, barely visible. You wouldn't dare climb it, but someone did, and the mountain remembered. You've been walking for hours. The sun is beginning to bow, and Petra changes color again. From terracotta to rust, from flame to shadow. You're not sure how far you've gone from the main path. There are no signs, no crowds, only the cliffs and the doorways cut into them. Tombs, they're everywhere. Not buried, not hidden. They're right there in front of you, bold, theatrical, unapologetically carved into the face of eternity. Some have columns, some have arches, some are plain, little more than squared holes in the stone. But all of them feel watched. Petra is not a city of the living. Not really. It's a city of remains. And the dead here, they were not hidden away. They were elevated, celebrated, framed in golden hour light for all time. You stop before one of the lesser-known tombs. No name, no frieze, just a shadowed opening, about your height, maybe taller. A black square in a red cliff. You hesitate, then you step in, and at once the temperature drops. Not dramatically, but enough for your skin to tighten, for your arms to raise their guard hairs like a field of wheat in a nervous breeze. It's quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind, just your breath echoing. And something else, a low vibration. Not a sound, more like a pressure. Like the room itself is inhaling. You take another step. The floor is uneven, carved in haste or with grief. You run your hand along the interior wall. Cool, slightly damp, a whisper of minerals clinging to your skin. This is where someone was buried. You can feel it. Maybe a merchant, maybe a priest, maybe no one important at all, but someone who once stood under the same sun you now curse. You think of what they believed, that the tomb wasn't an end, but a waiting room, that the soul would rest here until it was summoned. By gods, by stars, by dreams. So they carved the tombs wide enough for the body, and just big enough for the hope that someone might return. You sit for a moment. Let the dark wrap around you like fabric. It's not menacing, just full. And that's when you feel it. A shift, not of air, not of ground, but of presence. Like something ancient just stirred. Not out of anger, not out of hunger. Just to say, I see you. You don't panic. Because Petra doesn't want your fear. It wants your attention. These tombs aren't haunted in the Hollywood sense. There are no jump scares, no flickering lights, just the slow, creeping realization that you're not the first person to kneel here. Not by 1,000, not by 10,000. Somewhere beneath you, deep in the stone, are bones, wrapped in linens that have long since turned to dust. Teeth that once bit dates and whispered names. Hands that once held Miss Swack's sticks and jugs of wine. And now, only memory. But memory, in Petra, is active. It moves. You whisper a word, maybe a name, maybe a prayer. The tomb absorbs it, doesn't answer, but holds it. You step back into the fading daylight, blink against the glow, and suddenly, The tombs all around you feel less like architecture and more like audience. They don't judge. They don't threaten. They remember. And that might be worse. Because silence doesn't mean absence. Not here. Not in Petra. Here, silence means someone's listening. And they've been listening for a very, very long time. You follow the sound first. Not music, not quite, but rhythm. Wooden wheels creaking, iron pans clanking, voices arguing in half a dozen languages, and the constant bray of an overworked donkey trying to unionize. And then it hits you, the smell. Before you see the marketplace, you smell it. A cocktail of the divine and the grotesque. Cinnamon, goat sweat, crushed dates, camel dung, olive oil, urine, frankincense, smoked meat, sunburnt leather, flies, a lot of flies. This isn't a Disney market with colorful silks and gentle flutes playing in the background. This is the beating, sticky, swearing heart of Petra, and it smells like everything the human body can produce, plus spices worth more than gold. You push your way into the crowd, which is less of a flow and more of a collision. Everyone's shouting. No one's listening. A man yells in Greek about the purity of his saffron. A woman counters in Aramaic that it's been mixed with sawdust. He spits on the ground in protest. She spits back. Business concluded. Children dart between legs. Pickpockets or apprentices. It's hard to tell. You check your pouch. Still there. Still empty. The air is thick, with smoke, sweat, and intent. Because everything here has purpose. Every bag of spice. Every hunk of bread. Every haggard chicken with too many opinions. There's a man selling perfumes. Little clay flasks lined up like soldiers. He dabs one on your wrist before you can protest. It smells floral and vaguely like wet linen. From Alexandria, he says in a language that might be mostly invented. You nod. He smiles. You walk away. He curses, but gently, like a lullaby for thieves. Another man offers you a pomegranate. It's split, ruby seeds glistening like spilled rubies. You take a bite. It's warm, sweet, and slightly gritty, like biting into a scandal. This is not a tourist market. No one is smiling to be polite. No one is pretending to enjoy your company. This isn't for you. It's for them. Merchants from Palmyra, horsemen from the north, wanderers from Egypt. You hear dialects layered like carpets. Aramaic, Nabatean, Greek, Persian, a flicker of Latin, a grunt that might be commerce or indigestion. Coins clink. Purses vanish. Deals are struck in whispers and in shouts. You pass a man selling dried scorpions. You don't ask why. You pass another selling scrolls, real or fake, who knows. One is labeled in crude ink, names of the winds. You almost buy it, but the price is ridiculous. Also, the wind doesn't need you to name it. There's a woman selling charms. Bronze bone teeth. She catches your eye and says nothing, but her silence sells better than any salesman's pitch. You move on. Petra's market isn't just economic. It's spiritual. It's social. It's survival. This is where news travels faster than horses. Where rumors are worth more than taxes. Where someone might be selling the same incense that's being offered at a nearby altar, only cheaper, and with a complimentary insult. You sit beside a stall selling dried figs. You don't buy anything. You just watch. A boy gets caught stealing. He gets slapped, not by the merchant, but by his mother. He cries, then steals again. That's the spirit. The sun lowers. The shadows stretch across the stalls like lazy gods reaching for one last prayer. Smoke thickens. Laughter bubbles. Someone starts singing. Terribly. And for a moment, just a moment, you forget about the tombs. You forget about the gods and the facades and the quiet breath of sandstone that seems to think it knows your name. Because here, in the middle of the noise and the stink and the chaos, life happens. loud, messy, glorious, mortal. This is Petra, too. Not carved, not sacred, just lived. You lean your head back. The sky is orange. Your face is sweaty. Your fingers are sticky with pomegranate. And for once, you're not trying to understand anything. You're just here, alive, unwashed, unbothered. And somehow, that feels like enough. There's a moment in Petra, a thin, golden crack in time, just before the sun sinks behind the cliffs, when a stone bleeds. Not literally, but you wouldn't be surprised if it did. You're standing in the open now. The marketplace has faded behind you, its noise dissolving into dusk. The tombs stretch above like giant eyes half-lidded in shadow, and the wind has stilled. No more whispers, only breath. You look up, and there it is, the light. The kind of light that painters dream of and priests misinterpret. The kind of light that's not soft, but sharp. As if the sun, in its final act, wants to wound the stone one last time before it disappears. And Petra responds. The cliffs, the facades, the carved gods and doorways. They ignite. From within, the reds darken, the pinks deepen, and the stone turns to blood. Not metaphorical blood, not poetic blood, real seeming, sun-warmed, memory-soaked blood. You've never seen rock do this. It glows, not like gold, but like old fire, like something that once burned hot and fast, and now smolders beneath the surface. It feels intimate, like you're watching someone undress, like the city is showing you what it hides all day. Its wounds, its heat, its history stripped of formality. Because Petra at sunset isn't sacred. It's vulnerable. The columns that stood so proud in daylight now lean like aching ribs. The tombs, once godly, now resemble mouths, open and silent, waiting for names they've forgotten how to pronounce. And the stone itself? The stone moves. Not physically, of course not, but optically, emotionally. It ripples. As the light sinks lower, the shadows climb. They creep up the facades like regrets, like hands, like time catching up to something that thought it could stand still forever. You sit on a ledge. It's still warm beneath you, and it smells faintly of iron. Or maybe that's your imagination, but probably not, because Petra holds memory in layers. You think of the people who built this, the stonemasons who hung from ropes, carving columns upside down, the priests who watched the sun set from this very spot, timing their sacrifices to the way the light kissed the altar, the traders who arrived at twilight, tired and sunburnt, only to be stopped in their tracks by this same glow. You're not special, but you're included, just another witness, just another human willing to be humbled by geology wearing its oldest dress. The sun is almost gone now. The last light lingers on a single column above you, and you swear just for breath, it pulses, like a heartbeat. Then, gone. Shadow falls, and the blood in the stone congeals into purple, then black. Petra exhales, and the city once again becomes stone. But you remember what it was, just for a moment, when a mountain remembered it had once been flesh, and let itself bleed. You wake the next morning with sand in your teeth. Again, the ground has printed itself across your back. Your ankles ache, and your dreams were strange, full of staircases that led nowhere and a voice that kept asking, "What do you remember?" You sit up. Petra is already awake. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the light is coming, creeping over the cliffs like a rumor. You head toward the lower path, past tombs, past goat prints, past a place where someone's been chewing date pits and spitting them into a neat pile, like punctuation for a forgotten sentence. And that's when you see him, sitting on a flat stone, legs folded under robes the color of dust and sleep, is a man. Elderly, thin, wearing sandals so worn they look like stories. He's not meditating. He's not praying. He's just being. You hesitate. He looks up. His face is creased, creases within creases. A topography of heat and hindsight. He says nothing. Then, after a long silence, he nods to the spot beside him. You sit. More silence. Then, in a voice so soft it sounds like a breeze brushing stone, he speaks. The gods are quiet now, but the rocks are still talking. People just don't know how to listen. You don't reply. Because, honestly, what do you say to that? He picks up a small pebble, turns it over in his hand. This one saw a king fall in love. This one held the foot of a runaway slave. This one got kicked by a Roman horse. Pause. Not all rocks are wise. Some are just tired. He smiles, almost apologetically. You glance around. There's no one else here. No vendors. No pilgrims. Just you, the philosopher, and the sound of your shared breathing. He smells like sandalwood, sweat, and something else. Olives and endings. His eyes are pale, not from age, but from knowing too much. He points to a carved niche nearby that used to hold a god. Now it holds pigeons. Pigeons are louder and far more demanding. You chuckle. He is not. He runs a finger through the dust at his feet, draws a rough circle. People think Petra was built with vision. It wasn't. It was built with absence. The fear of not being remembered. That's all any of this is. A conversation with death where we speak first. You look at the tombs around you. Suddenly, they feel more like letters than houses for the dead. Letters to gods. To time. To us. He leans closer. The gods? They were never really here. But the people were. And that's enough. It has to be. You want to ask him who he is. A priest? A hermit? A very well-rested hallucination? But you don't. Because you know the answer would ruin something. He stands slowly, the bones of his knees crackling like ancient scrolls, brushes dust from his robe, and looks at you one last time. The mountain forgets nothing, but it doesn't remember names. Only presence. Then he turns, walks away. No footprints, no sound, just absence, walking like a man. You sit there for a long time, watching the sun finally crest the cliffs. It turns the tombs to gold, turns your breath visible, turns your thoughts inward. Maybe he was real. Maybe he was a myth dressed in rags. Maybe Petra sent him, because she knew you needed to hear something from someone who didn't need you to understand it. All you know is this. Somewhere in this desert city of silence and stone, you met a philosopher in sandals and dirt, and he gave you nothing, except everything. Rome arrives like it always does, with trumpets, taxes, and an inconvenient sense of destiny. It sends maps first, then roads, then men in sandals, armed with scrolls and swords, insisting they're here to stabilize trade and liberate markets, which is Roman for we want your stuff. And Petra? She doesn't panic. She doesn't build walls, doesn't rally troops, doesn't send envoys weeping with patriotism. She just waits, because Petra knows something Rome doesn't. Stone can't be rushed. It remembers longer, breathes slower, and doesn't rise for conquerors who wear too much bronze and confidence. You can imagine it, can't you? A Roman general, fresh from Gaul, chest puffed with borrowed victories, riding into the sick. He's heard whispers of a city carved from cliffs. A city rich with incense, gold, and the kind of water systems that make Rome's aqueducts look like plumbing for toddlers. He expects a fight, or at least a ceremony. What he gets is indifference. He arrives. No one greets him. No gates to storm. No citadel to seize. Just red rock and the scent of cooked goat. Petra doesn't resist, but she doesn't welcome. She lets him pass, lets his men camp by the tombs, drink from her cisterns, sketch her facades into their scrolls. And then she waits for them to leave, because Petra doesn't do conquest. She does absorption. She doesn't bow. She borrows. And Rome for all its columns and coins, doesn't quite know what to do with that. They try to name her. They call her Arabia Petrea. They stamp her onto coins, build a few temples, widen some roads, commission a theater or two, because that's what Rome does. It redecorates. But Petra doesn't flinch. She remains herself, even under empire, because Petra wasn't built to be ruled. She was built to outlive. Rome comes. Rome flexes. Rome names things. And Petra whispers, no, not aloud, not in defiance, but in the quiet refusal of a city that knows how to disappear in plain sight. Even as Roman influence seeps in, she digests it like salt and stew. Takes what's useful, spits out the rest. You can see it in the architecture. A column here, a frieze there. A Roman bathhouse awkwardly wedged between two tombs that don't care who bathed. Rome tried to stamp its name on the desert, but the sand always wins. Centuries later, when Rome crumbles under its own ambition, Petra doesn't even blink. She just shifts, shrinks, withdraws into the mountains like a hand into a sleeve. Because Petra is not a monument. She's a reaction. And sometimes the greatest resistance is to endure without needing to explain yourself. You stand now in the remnants of the Roman quarter. The stones are straighter here, more measured, less alive, but the wind still moves the same. The cliffs still burn red at dusk. And if you close your eyes, you can hear the desert whisper. They came. They stayed. They left. I'm still here. So when Rome knocked, Petra didn't shout, didn't fight, didn't flee. She just whispered, and the wind carried her answer, beyond the reach of empire. You climb the slope slowly. The path is scattered with broken pottery shards, splinters of time catching sunlight like mica. Every step crunches like old secrets. The wind picks up, then dies, then picks up again, as if something ancient is pacing above you. And then you see it, not towering, not ostentatious, not preserved, but present. A ruin, yes, but not defeated. Columns shattered, blocks toppled, foundation half swallowed by sand. And yet, it waits. This is the temple of the winged lions. And like everything in Petra, it refuses to be understood on the first look, or the second, or the 100th. You step over a collapsed threshold, brush your hand along a fallen pillar, now lying like a broken limb beneath the sun. The stone is veined, dusty, warm. This temple wasn't built for kings. It was built for something older. A goddess. But which one? No one agrees. Some say Al-Azza, the fierce desert deity, guardian of springs and fertility, one of the three goddesses once worshipped in Mecca before the rise of Islam. Others say it's a local version of Aphrodite, imported in Nabatean Ifid, stripped of her Greek perfumes and wrapped in desert linen. But the truth? The truth is that gods don't stay still. They move. They evolve. They borrow each other's names and change their faces in the firelight. And Petra, ever the alchemist, blended every god she touched. So this temple might be for a goddess with no name. One whose voice sounded like sandstorm. One who accepted incense and blood in equal measure. You walk past the remains of the altar. It's cracked, flanked by lion heads, winged, of course. Not majestic, not comforting. These lions don't guard. They glare. Their wings arch backward, frozen in the suggestion of flight. But you get the sense they never took off. Not because they couldn't, but because they chose not to. Lions with wings. A contradiction. A metaphor. A statement. Because this wasn't a place for balance. It was a place for power. And power, in Petra, didn't look like marble statues or golden idols. It looked like wind trapped in form. The goddess here, whoever she was not gentle. She was carved in fragments, her figure found on shattered reliefs. A torso with breasts, hips wide and certain, hands held open or maybe clenched, eyes erased. Some say she was a mother. Some say a warrior. Some say she was neither, just a force. Not someone to love, but someone to survive. You kneel where the priestesses might have stood. Women of the temple, barefoot, robed, eyes rimmed with ash and oil. They moved through this space with quiet precision, lighting incense, chanting in half-remembered tongues, offering milk, honey, blood, depending on the mood of the divine. They didn't smile. They listened, because to serve the goddess here wasn't about joy. It was about attention. It was about presence, so sharp it could cut. You breathe in, smell dust, old charcoal, and the ghost of perfume. And then the wind changes. Soft, sudden. A swirl of air lifts from the collapsed ceiling, carries grit into your mouth, your eyes, your memory. You see her for a moment, not with your eyes, but with whatever part of you still belongs to dreams. She stands where the altar used to be, draped in shadow, her outline shifting. Part woman, part lion, part silence. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to, because you're not here to understand. You're here to witness. The temple is crumbling. The columns have fallen. The lions have not flown. And still, she is here. The winged lions stare across time. Stone feathers poise forever. And the goddess, whoever she was, still listens to anyone brave enough to kneel without asking why. It happens suddenly. The warmth vanishes. The air shifts. And without warning, the wind arrives. Not a breeze. Not some polite little sigh through the canyon. No, this is a sandstorm. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't growl. It just appears, like regret or memory, and begins to scrape the world clean. You duck into a crevice between two half-fallen columns, pull your shawl, or what's left of it, tight across your mouth. The dust stings your eyes, bites into your hair, grinds itself into your fingernails, your ears, the lines on your face. It's not painful exactly. It's relentless, like time made visible. And in this moment, as the world turns to blur, you finally understand something the ancients must have known all along. You don't matter. Not the way you thought you did. Not in this place. Not to this land. Not to the wind. You are a temporary arrangement of skin and breath. And Petra has seen thousands like you. Pilgrims, queens, murderers, children. All of them thought their footsteps would echo longer than the storm. None of them were right. You sit now back against the rock. The sand whips sideways. You taste grit on your tongue. There's no point in speaking. The wind would swallow it. And that's when the voice returns. Not from outside. From inside. The part of you that still dares to believe that names mean something. The part that whispers, "Remember me." But the truth is, you won't. And neither will this place. Petra does not mourn the bodies it has buried. It does not tell stories unless you force them from the walls. And even then, they don't answer. Because the ancients who lived here, they were closer to silence than we are. They knew better than to expect permanence. They carved into stone not because they thought it would last, but because it was already decaying, and they wanted to decay with it. A name on a tomb, a face on a pillar, a lion with wings that never flew. All of them slowly melting back into dust. And you're joining them, grain by grain. Because Petra doesn't ask who you were. It asks who you're willing to become. Once your skin has cracked, and your voice has been ground to silt, the storm begins to ease. Not end, just shift. The light breaks through in pale fingers. The air thick with the kind of stillness that comes after something large has passed by without stopping. You stand. Your feet feel heavier, or maybe older. Your clothes are stiff with sand. Your lips split. Your eyes red. And yet, you're calmer. Because for a few moments, you stop pretending you were the center of anything. You let the wind strip you of your story. And beneath it, You found nothing. And that nothing, it didn't scare you. It freed you. You walk now slower toward the ridge where the path curls like a question mark. The tombs reappear, blurred by sand, softened by time. And for the first time, you don't look at them and think of the people who died. You think of the dust, of the way it settles, the way it coats, the way it remembers nothing, and in doing so, remembers everything. The ancients once stood where you stand. They prayed here, killed here, kissed here. They also coughed, tripped, dropped their baskets, got bored, fell asleep. They were not myths. They were dust in motion, just like you. And the wind? It didn't come to punish. It came to remind that in the eyes of the ancients, you're not special. You are not chosen. You are not even seen. But in your smallness, you're crumbling. Your nameless walk through stone and silence. You are more human than you've ever been. And Petra, she accepts you, not as a guest, not as a pilgrim, but as dust, returned. By now, you've accepted that Petra is not dead. She is not a ruin, not a memory, not an echo. She is inhabited, not by tourists or traders, not by camels or scholars with maps too large to fold back up, but by something else, something that doesn't flinch when you blink, something that's been watching you, patiently, from the moment you step through the sick. It begins slowly. You're walking through the street of facades. The name is misleading. There's no street, and what you're looking at are not just facades. They're tombs, dozens, hundreds, some stacked on top of one, another like books too sacred to touch. You've seen tombs before, marble ones, granite ones, high budget, low attendance ones. But these are different, because they're not quiet. They breathe. You pass one that's gaping open, its entry dark as oil. You peer inside. There's no sarcophagus, no bones, just space, and a feeling of a presence with no name. It's not hostile, but it's not welcoming either. It feels expectant, like the room is still waiting for someone to return, like it knows someone will. And in that moment, the truth flickers across your skin like static. The dead didn't leave Petra. They never intended to, because Petra wasn't a city with cemeteries. Petra was a city of the dead. They lived among the tombs, died in them, worshipped next to them, slept in the shadow of their ancestors every single night. Death was an afterthought. It was the design. You step into one of the tombs. It smells like stone left to dry in the sun, then forgotten. There's no decoration, just carved benches, a shallow pit, and silence so thick you feel like you need to whisper to pass through it. Your footsteps echo back at you, just a beat too slow. The air feels denser here, not stale, just full. You imagine someone lying on that bench, arms crossed, lips sealed, skin darkened by sun, then faded by centuries. Not embalmed, not glorified, just returned. You imagine the ritual, the family standing outside, silent. A priest murmuring words only the mountain understands. A jar of incense broken, the scent mixing with heat. Coins pressed into hands. A name spoken once, then never again. Because in Petra, the dead are not mourned. They are integrated. They don't haunt. They hover. They listen. You feel it now. That pull. Not from behind. From below. Not gravity exactly, but gravity's cousin, memory. Something under your feet knows you're here, and it's paying attention. You back out of the tomb slowly, and when you turn, you realize something you wish you hadn't. They're all open. The tombs. Every one of them. Mouths agape. Windows without glass. Passages that don't end, but loop back into time itself. No one sealed these. No one locked them, because they weren't meant to stay closed. Petra didn't bury its dead. It sheltered them, and they, in turn, shelter you, without permission, without warmth, without malice. Only expectation, because when you walk through Petra's tombs, you are not alone. Not in the something is behind you way. In the you have entered the conversation you are not invited to way. You walk between the walls, past the carved urns, past niches where gods once sat, and where wind now curls like smoke. You hear nothing, but you feel the question rise. When will you lie down? Not now, not soon, but one day. And Petra is waiting. Not for you specifically. She's not sentimental, but for someone, anyone, because the tombs are not abandoned. They're vacant, and vacancy is just invitation by another name. You walk faster now, not out of fear, out of reverence. You are a guest here, a temporary one. The dead don't resent you. They just outnumber you, and they always will. You leave the tombs behind, but they do not leave you. They cling, not like ghosts, but like truths you can't quite forget. Because in Petra, the dead don't vanish. They wait, and the city keeps their seats warm. You've heard the story. A lost city, hidden in the cliffs, forgotten by time, waiting with its arms full of treasure. That's what they always say, isn't it? The explorers who crossed deserts with broken compasses and half-mad eyes, muttering of gold buried behind the treasury's great stone urn. The Bedouins who claimed a pharaoh once fled here with his riches and hid them in the mountain. Even the bullets, dozens of them, fired into that ancient urn by men hoping it would crack open and spill its guts. But here's what Petra will never say out loud. There was no treasure. At least, not the kind anyone could steal. Because Petra's greatest wealth was never measured in coins or jewels. It was never kept in vaults. It didn't sparkle. It listened. You walk now through the lower city, past the theater carved in a stone, where no plays are performed and no applause has echoed for 2,000 years. Past ruined columns that once framed public buildings, temples, markets, spaces where people once believed in things. And you realize Petra didn't hoard riches. She hoarded something far more dangerous. Stillness, silence, memory. Gold can be spent, stolen, melted down, whispered away in bribes and wars and dowries. But memory? Memory sticks. It's in the grooves of the drinking channels that still wind through the canyon floor. It's in the worn threshold stones, eroded not by time, but by thousands of barefoot goodbyes. It's in the grain of the rock where the chisel stopped, not because the job was done, but because the carver's hand gave out first. And this great, aching presence is Petra's true wealth, because the city knew something empires always forget. Treasure doesn't shine. It echoes. It echoes in the way water moved through her like blood. Veins carved into cliffs by people who were desperate and brilliant and beautifully afraid. It echoes in the languages layered on her walls. Aramaic, Greek, Nabatean, Latin, none of them dominant, all of them partial. It echoes in the choice to carve temples instead of building them, to etch memory directly into the bone of the earth. You sit on a broken ledge. Beneath your hands is a block of sandstone, shaped but unmarked, a leftover from some forgotten project, a piece of ambition that never got named. And you feel it, faint but there. Wait, not physical, emotional, as if the stone itself remembers what it was supposed to become, as if it still holds the sketch of a future that never happened. That's Petra's wealth. It's not in gold leaf or ivory. It's in the fragments, the unfinished work, the echoes of people who dared to leave fingerprints on eternity and never signed their names. You think of the archaeologists who've come and gone, the looters, the historians, all of them trying to define this place, to pin it down, to wrap it in footnotes and borders. But Petra doesn't care, because she knows the more you try to own something sacred, the faster it slips into dust. The city is rich, not because of what she holds, but because of what she lets go. A culture that could have tried to dominate its neighbors. Instead, carved homes into cliffs, and waited for caravans to bring the world to her. A kingdom that never raised an army large enough to frighten anyone, but mastered the architecture of thirst and survival. You stand again, and now, as the wind curls around your ankles like a story with no ending, you understand. The treasure was never behind the urn. It was never buried in the tombs. It was here all along, in the silence that teaches you how to listen, in the wind that remembers your presence even when you forget your purpose, in the stone that welcomes your breath and gives nothing in return, except the gift of being seen, then quietly forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, that's worth more than gold ever was. You didn't come here looking for anything specific. Not gold, not revelation, not even closure. You just came, like so many before you. Drifters, wanderers, exiles, people who ran out of cities and gods and people to blame. People who were done with the known world and ready to be swallowed by something older. That's who Petra has always taken in, not the victorious, the unmoored. And she doesn't ask questions. She doesn't ask where you've been. She doesn't ask why you're here. She just watches, and she waits, because Petra was never designed as a destination. She's not a point on a map. She's the feeling you get when the map stops making sense. Some places welcome the powerful. Others cradle the righteous. But Petra, she shelters the lost. The man who abandoned his caravan to sit in silence beneath a tomb and never returned. The widow who carved poems into stone walls with her fingernails. The child who wandered away from his village and grew old among the shadows of the treasury. They weren't heroes. They weren't remembered. But Petra remembers them. You feel it in the air. The kind of stillness that only exists where no one expects to be found. It's not loneliness. It's protection, because Petra doesn't offer comfort. She offers space. Space to fall apart. Space to listen to the sound of your own heartbeat, distorted by cliffs. Space to sit down in the sand and finally admit that you're tired. And when you do, when you let the weight drop from your shoulders, when you stop performing survival like a ceremony, she responds, not with signs, not with answers, just presence. She wraps herself around you the way dust does, slowly, imperceptibly, until you're not sure where you end and she begins. You watch a bird land on the edge of a ruined wall. Its feathers ruffle in the dry wind. It stays just long enough to remind you that not all things that arrive broken are meant to leave whole. Some things remain scattered, and that's okay. You think of those who fled here long ago, merchants betrayed by their guilds, lovers banished for forbidden kisses, philosophers who stopped believing in their own ideas. What do they find? Not salvation, not rebirth, just a kind of honest silence. A place where the sky is too big for shame, and the cliffs are too old to be impressed by your fears. You realize now, being lost isn't a failure. It's a direction. A sacred, necessary wandering. And Petra, she's the soft landing you didn't know you needed. Not a city, not a tomb, not a miracle, just a witness. A place to collapse, to remember, to be forgotten on purpose. You stand now at the edge of the high place of sacrifice, looking down at a world that once named you. From up here, the tombs look like thoughts, the pathways like scars, the ruins like truths we try to cover with beauty. You breathe in, you breathe out, and for the first time in a long time, you don't feel like you're running from anything. You feel like you're being held, not tightly, not with arms, just held, by stone, by wind, by absence made gentle. Petra doesn't promise you anything, not healing, not transformation, not even peace, but she offers you something better. Room to break, room to wait, room to simply be lost and no longer afraid of it. Because the truth is, you were never lost. You were just on your way to the only place, that welcomes the lost, like they're finally home. You wake before dawn, not because you meant to, but because Petra doesn't follow the same rhythms as the world you came from. Time here doesn't tick. It resonates. You sit in the half-light, the cliffs slowly turning from shadow to blood. The silence is deep. So deep it feels like it's pressing gently against your skin, like you're submerged in thought that isn't yours. And that's when you hear it. Not a voice, not a whisper, something softer, something older. It's not coming from outside. It's not carried by the wind or rising from the ground. It's inside the stones, and you don't understand it, because you're listening with the wrong part of yourself. This place doesn't speak in language. It speaks in remains, in weathered carvings that no one can decipher anymore, in cracked symbols that once told stories of gods who now go unnamed, in foot-worn thresholds that say more than any scroll ever could. You run your fingers across one of the stones near the tombs. The grooves are shallow, nearly erased. Someone wrote something here. A blessing, maybe a warning, a name, or maybe just a sentence that didn't make it into history. You try to read it, but Petra wasn't built for translation. She was built for recognition. This is a language not of grammar, but of gesture, not of syntax, but of silence. It's the way the wind pauses before rounding a bend, the way light slides down the treasury's facade like a sigh, the way your breath slows, unprompted, as if your body knows it's been invited to listen. It's easy to forget, in your world of voice notes and notifications, that not all truth is verbal. Some things are meant to be absorbed, not spoken, not processed, just received. The ancients here knew that. They didn't write to impress. They wrote to remember. They carved prayers into walls because ink fades, because memory leaks, and because sometimes the only way to make something eternal is to hammer it into rock, with fingers that know they're temporary. You move deeper into the canyon, following no path but the one that feels slightly less certain than the others. Around you, niches in the stone hold figures that have lost their faces. Once divine, now weathered into anonymity. But don't mistake erosion for erasure, because Petra's gods never needed faces. They needed presence, and presence doesn't age. You enter a chamber, the kind archaeologists love to measure but can't quite explain. The ceiling is streaked with mineral veins. The floor holds shadows like a cradle. There's no writing here, no art, no altar, just silence. But in that silence, you begin to understand. This room is the language, not a sentence, not a paragraph, a feeling, the kind that says, someone once stood here with something to offer and no words to give it, and that was enough. You close your eyes. You listen, not with ears, but with skin, with breath, with the soft, bruised part of you that still believes in things you can't prove. And in that moment, you hear it again. That language older than words. It says nothing you can repeat, nothing you could ever translate, but it says everything you needed to know. And for once, you don't need to speak back. You just let the silence say it with you. It follows you, the silence. But this is not the polite hush of libraries, or the breathless pause before a lover's kiss. This silence is thick, grainy, made of memory and dust and secrets held too long. It lives in the cracks between Petra's stones. It curls around pillars that forgot their gods. It lingers in the dry air, like the echo of something that once mattered and then didn't. And the strange thing is, you begin to trust it, because unlike history books, silence never lies. It doesn't favor the victors. It doesn't polish the facts. It doesn't sanitize. It just remembers. You step into the remains of a structure whose name no one agrees on. Some say it was a house. Some say a temple. Others say a place for mourning or sacrifice or both. But the silence doesn't care what you call it. It was here before names, and it will be here long after your voice forgets how to form them. You sit, not because you plan to, because you're tired in a way that has nothing to do with walking. It's the kind of tired that comes from carrying too many stories. Yours, theirs, all of them tangled and unspoken. And the silence, finally, does what no word has managed to do. It holds you. It doesn't comfort. It doesn't explain. It simply stays. You run your fingers across the stone beside you. It's been worn smooth by time, wind, grief. You wonder how many hands touched it before yours. A mother in mourning. A priest after sacrifice. A traitor who came to Petra thinking he would pass through and never leave. They all sat here, maybe, said nothing, did nothing. And that's exactly what made the moment sacred. Because Petra's holiness doesn't live in action. It lives in witnessing, in allowing yourself to be seen by a presence that doesn't judge or applaud, just notices. You look up. The roof is gone. Only a frame of sky remains. The stars are beginning to appear, one then another, as if the heavens are exhaling slowly. And still, the silence remains. You start to hear it differently now, not as absence, but as testimony, because silence here isn't emptiness. It's the archive, the record of every prayer whispered into stone, every footstep, every betrayal, every promise made and broken beneath this same ceilingless sky. Silence saw the first lover's kiss under this cliff. It watched the priest wash blood from his hands. It listened to the girl who came here with nothing and whispered her own name just to prove she still existed. It saw, it sees. You lie back on the stone. No pillow, no blanket, just rock that feels strangely like understanding. And the silence, like a heavy woolen cloak, folds over you. You think about your life, its noise, its demands, its performance. And for once, you don't want to explain it. You don't want to make sense of it. You just want to be witnessed. The way Petra witnesses everything. Quietly, without resolution, without conclusion. The wind moves gently now, less like a storm, more like a hand brushing dust from a page. And you wonder, maybe Petra never wanted to be found. Maybe she just wanted to be heard, not by scholars or tourists, but by people like you. People who no longer believe they have to be loud, to be real. And so you lie still, not speaking, not seeking, just letting yourself be seen by the silence that saw everything. You didn't mean to stay this long. You came to see ruins, snap a picture, whisper something about ancient wonders before disappearing into the comfort of asphalt and Wi-Fi. But Petra doesn't work like that. She doesn't offer you a show. She absorbs you. And now, as the final edge of daylight bleeds out over the ridgelines, you realize something strange. You can't quite remember the sound of your own voice. You try to say your name aloud, just to see if it still fits, just to feel something familiar. But the wind catches the syllables before they land. And, you're fading, not dying, not vanishing, just softening, like parchment in heat. Like a trail of footprints already half swallowed by sand. You haven't spoken to another human in hours, maybe days. And the longer you go without mirrors or phones, or even echoes, the more you start to leak. Out of your shape, out of your story, out of whatever outline the world used to draw around you. This would terrify most people, but you feel peace. Because this erasure isn't punishment. It's release. You're being let go of. By the desert. By time. By the version of yourself that needed to be heard to believe it existed. The rocks don't remember your resume. The dust doesn't care who broke your heart. The cliffs don't know what language you cry in. And somehow, that feels like kindness. Because back home, identity is a performance. You dress it. Feed it. Post it. Here, there's no one watching. Only the sky. which has watched too many empires fall to be impressed by your attempts at self-definition. So you walk, slow, barefoot now, because your shoes gave up somewhere between the monastery steps and the high place of sacrifice. The ground is warm, rough. It presses back. It tells you, gently, that you are still here, but only barely. You pass a cave. Inside, faint drawings etched into the walls. Animals' symbols, maybe stars. Someone once tried to say something. Not in words, in gesture, in shape, in hope that something of themselves might survive the forgetting. But the desert is patient, and she forgets everyone eventually. She turns kings to whispers, temples to dust, and names into wind-borne syllables with no meaning left in them. You sit down in the cave, not to seek shelter, but to surrender, to offer yourself to the forgetting. Because here's the secret no one tells you. Being forgotten isn't the end. It's a beginning. When your name is no longer heavy in your mouth. When your stories no longer define the room you're allowed to occupy. When your face is no longer mirrored in glass or expectation. What's left? Something quieter. Something softer. Something real. Maybe it's your breath. Maybe it's the way you press your palm against the cave wall and feel the pulse of the mountain. Maybe it's the fact that you are no longer performing presence. You are simply present. The stars come out, not suddenly. They emerge like memory. Slow, unapologetic, indifferent to your awe. And you lie down on the stone floor, your back to the ground, your eyes to the endless. And for the first time, you feel no need to be found. Let the world forget you. Let the desert take your name. Because what Petra teaches you is this. You're not your voice. You're not your title. You're not your story. You are the breath that still moves through dust. The warmth that lingers after a body is left. The silence between footsteps on ancient stone. You're not gone. You're simply becoming untraceable. And somehow, it feels like grace. By now, you've stopped asking questions. Stop trying to name every rock. Stop trying to photograph the exact shade of dusk between these cliffs. Because Petra doesn't reward knowing. She rewards witnessing. And somewhere between the shadows of the royal tombs and the high ridges where the goats no longer fear the wind, you begin to understand the strange math of time. The things we think will last don't. The monumental, the praised, the marble words and gilded statues. They crack, they fall, they vanish beneath the weight of dust and disinterest. But the small things, the fragile ones, they linger. A child's footprint preserved in dry earth. A cooking bowl still blackened from someone's last meal. A poem carved on a cave wall in a hand that knew no one might ever read it. Those are the things time holds close. Not out of sentiment, but out of honesty. Because time isn't cruel. It's just unsentimental. It forgets the loud. It remembers the true. You sit now in what used to be a garden. Yes, a garden. In the middle of the desert. In a kingdom carved into stone. There were channels here once, bringing water from mountains you still can't pronounce. There were fig trees, olives, mint. You imagine someone kneeling in this very patch of dirt. Fingernails rimmed with soil. Sleeves wet from tending life in a place designed to resist it. And you realize, this is what survives. Not the gods, not the kings, not the war chants or the trade routes, but the care, the hand that watered, the voice that hummed, the love that lingered in daily acts no one thought to record. You lean back against a fragment of carved stone, once a pillar, now just presence. There's a bee, of all things, circling lazily around the dust-choked flowers growing wild between ruins. No script mentions her. No book credits her. But here she is, unbothered, unclaimed, enduring. You think of all the things you've tried to preserve in your life. Titles, photos, proof. And you wonder now if all that effort was misdirected. Because Petra preserved none of her legends. Her queens are nameless. Her architects anonymous. Her most intricate temples abandoned, incomplete. But her gesture remains. The way the stairs are carved to catch moonlight. The way the cisterns remember how water moves. The way even the tombs feel like invitations, not endings. This wasn't a civilization obsessed with permanence. It was a civilization obsessed with belonging. And somehow, that's what let it echo across centuries of silence. You close your eyes, and you ask yourself, quietly, what have I loved enough to let it be forgotten? It's a brutal question, because love isn't proven by how long you make something last. Love is proven by how gently you can let it go. You exhale. The stars are out again. The same stars that watched the first Nabatean set down a pack. Look up at the cliffs and decide to stay. The stars have seen it all. The markets, the murders, the marriages. They watched it rise. They watched it fall. And they said nothing. Because the stars, like Petra, know this. What survives isn't what you build. It's what you offer. A hand extended. A life tended. A story whispered into stone with no hope it will be told again. You rise slowly. You brush dust from your clothes. But you don't brush it all. Because now, a little dust is holy. It means you belonged, even for a moment, to something time chose to keep. You thought this was the end, a final walk among ruins, a sunset over fallen facades, a farewell glance at columns too tired to hold themselves up. But Petra has one more truth for you, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't get written on plaques or taught in lecture halls. It's this: she never died. She just stopped performing. You walk now through the less traveled parts of the city, past facades not polished by postcards, past shrines forgotten even by the memory of their gods. There are no tour groups here, no echoes of camera shutters, only the sound of your feet brushing against loose stone, and the wind speaking in a language made of sighs and sediment. And yet, something moves, not with speed, not with urgency, but with the deep, cellular rhythm of a heart that beats beneath centuries. You can feel it, not beneath your feet, but inside your ribs. A thrum, a pulse, like Petra is breathing, slow and wide, inhaling the silence of night, and exhaling your need to define her. You pause near what was once a home. There's no sign to tell you that, no rope to keep you out, but something about it feels familiar. There's a threshold, still slightly indented where feet crossed countless times. There's a niche in the wall. Was it for a lamp? An idol? A keepsake? And there's a small, crumbled step in the corner. The kind you only notice because your body automatically avoids it, as if someone long ago learned to step over it, and the memory stayed in the stone. You sit there, letting your weight press into the bones of a place that once held breath and soup and lullabies. And you wonder, if you dig, not with shovels, but with silence, what would you find? Not gold, not secrets, but maybe a warmth that never left. Because kingdoms don't die when the temples fall. They die when their warmth disappears. And Petra's warmth? It's still here. You feel it in the softness of the wind at dusk. You hear it in the low drone of bees making peace with the flowers among rubble. You sense it in the way the stones never reject your presence. They simply include you, wordlessly, as if you've always been part of the story. You lie down on a slab that once held food or prayer, or maybe just the elbows of someone telling a joke at dusk. And beneath your back, you swear it, the stone is warm, not sun-warmed, life-warmed, because Petra didn't vanish. She folded inward. She became private. She chose not to decay, but to withdraw, like an old soul tired of explaining herself to people who only wanted her beauty. And in doing so, she became eternal. You look up at the stars, not counting them, not wishing on them, just letting them be. And beneath you, the earth breathes. You don't need science to prove it. You don't need poetry to decorate it. You just feel it, like the memory of a mother's hum in the dark, like the sound your body makes when you stop pretending to be useful. It's there, a breath, a life, a kingdom that learned to exist without witnesses. And maybe that's the truest kind of empire, one that survives not through conquest, but through quiet, one that outlasts the loud, by becoming invisible on purpose. You rise, not to leave, but to be part of that breath, to become one more soft echo in the lungs of a city that never asked to be found, only felt. The sun rises again. It always does, even in places that seem untouched by time. Even in Petra, where the wind has more memories than any book you'll ever read. You walk slowly now, not because you're tired, but because something in you knows this isn't a departure. It's a dissolving. Your shadow stretches long across the stone. You don't recognize it, not because it's different, but because you are. The version of you that arrived here, with the schedule, the photos to take, the life to return to. They never made it past the treasury that self-dissolved in salt and silence days ago. And what's left? Just a presence, a breath, a feeling. You pause in the sick, the narrow gorge that leads back to the world. This is where most people gasp when they see Petra for the first time. The sandstone glows gold, as if it's remembered its own divinity. The wind whispers through like a voice with no throat, carrying stories not meant to be kept. You look back once, not out of nostalgia, but to take one final imprint, the kind you don't share on a screen, but tuck into the folds of your soul, like a pressed flower no one else ever needs to see. And then you begin to walk, not away, not toward, just through, because the truth is, you can never leave Petra. Not really. Once she's been under your skin, once her dust has settled in your lungs, once you've wept without knowing why inside the hollow of a tomb that wasn't yours. She owns part of you, not in a way that takes, in a way that witnesses. Because Petra never clings. She never begs you to stay. She never tells you you're special. She simply includes you in her forgetting. And that is her greatest act of mercy. You reach the end of the gorge. The sun is higher now. The world calls. Wi-Fi bars flicker back into existence. Voices rise again. Names, numbers, the push of modern life floods into your awareness like a wave. And yet, you still carry her dust on your skin. You still feel her warmth in your bones. You still remember how silence tastes when it has nothing left to prove. And in that quiet part of you, the one no one sees, you understand something final. Goodbyes are for places that close behind you. Petra doesn't close. She remains. She stays open, cracked, wind-worn, vulnerable, like a wound, like a home. She doesn't chase you. She doesn't mourn you. She lets you go, as gently as she held you, because she knows you'll carry her into the world, not in your words, not in your photos, but in the stillness that follows you now wherever you walk. The stillness of breath slowed, of eyes widened, of footsteps that know how to listen. You don't say goodbye. You simply step forward, and the dust doesn't follow you. It just waits for the next soul who needs to be unmade in order to remember who they were before the noise. And the wind, without fanfare, begins to carve again, as it always has, as it always will.